come on. Hey, feel the rhythm. It's getting from the deepest of your soul. Now, use your senses. And everything will be easier than before. Keep on moving, funk is coming. Let yourself be. You'll become the star in this die. Spread your wings. Fly to me, funk is coming.
Okay, we are here with Mr. Alex Botten. I mean, fuck me. I was trying to say something really smart, but I can't, for the sake of me, do that. How are you doing, Alex? It's been a long time.
It has been many, many years, hasn't it, Fabio?
Yeah.
I'm good. You're looking very healthy yourself.
I'm looking alive, which again, we said before, in this day and times, it's good, right?
These days, you've no idea who still is.
Wow,
after so many years of the fragmenting of the great debate community.
Oh boy, yeah, we're gonna go there. Yeah, but
Okay.
Anyway, I'm doing fine. Fully vaccinated, boosted. I got all the the latest vaccine with all the optionals. 5G, satellites, leather interior, power steering. I got the full package. So yeah.
So I think is it tomorrow? I think tomorrow's the revised date for the 5G zombie apocalypse.
Really, I have no fucking
it
idea.
was going to be a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, fair
And
enough.
I think when it didn't happen, it got knocked forward by 2 weeks.
Okay.
Well, knocked back by 2 weeks, I should say. And as a result, they've decided that I think it must be tomorrow. I think tomorrow's the day. So tomorrow's the day when all the nanobots get activated.
So so given that people will not see that in about 2 or 3 weeks, there might be a chance that we are just recording this for nobody.
It may well be, or for the people who have survived, the non-vaccinated who have survived.
Right.
Because obviously, if you wanted to control the population, the way you do it is you kill the people who've taken the vaccine.
Yes.
And you're left with the people who resisted.
Yes.
And that's obviously, that makes sense to me.
Oh yeah.
How could it not?
Yeah, there's fully of people, which are going to dig their trenches, for the powerful, the people which oppose them. It makes total sense. Yeah, I agree with you. It's fantastic.
Absolutely, yes.
So you've been out of the equation for quite some time. Have you been, because, I know that a lot of people have been still into this kind of conversation, via, I don't know, either Facebook or some other medium. So have you been involved in some way, shape or form, or you just said, what, enough?
I pretty much just went enough. Mm-hmm. I think it ran its course for me. Excuse me. It ran its course for me, and I didn't feel there was anything more to be said. And the arguments that were just going around with the same ones over and over again. It was the same. Jason Burns didn't change, and Seitenbrugg and Kate didn't change, and Eric Hoving didn't change, and none of them changed. None of the kind of lesser players who kind of rode on the coattails of the bigger kind of Bible thumpers changed. There just didn't seem to be any point to it. And also, I started to care less. I think it was. I think partly it was when I saw some people in the community kind of skewed a little bit kind of right wing and started to take it into a slightly kind of uglier place. And it became almost kind of this kind of them versus us, almost kind of combative talk. And I kind of thought, well, I'm not sure that I care enough about it to get that far involved. I think it's when people started talking about Sagan of Akkad and people like that, and started saying, oh, you should get into this part of the debate because, it's about feminism and it's about Gamergate and stuff like that. And I thought, that's never something that particularly interested me. So I walked away from it. Sorry. So I was in a situation where my home situation changed quite dramatically. And it seemed like a good opportunity at that point to just go, no, I've had enough. And you know what, Fabio? I don't miss it at all.
So you haven't followed any of the new blood or old people trying to reinvent themselves or stuff like that?
I would occasionally look at a G-Man video to see if he's changed at all. No. I mean, the man's I think he's only about 3 years younger than me. So that's going to be putting him in he's past his mid-40s now, and he's still the same child as he ever was. I know that there's some people like Shani went off into a slightly more tragic story.
Oh, yeah.
Real decline into a whole load of stuff. I saw a live stream of her being arrested and stuff.
Dragnot is really into that. I mean, if you want to know about that stuff, you follow the guy. I mean, he follows them like a German Shepherd on a, it's brilliant.
And then obviously there was the whole thing with, Cy ten Bruggencate got into trouble, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He did a sex scandal, and then the less said about Matthew Bell, the better. So, because that was quite something. Seeing his horrible little hostess trolley on the national news in the UK
that
was quite something.
That was.
Yeah, and it was on. I was like, oh my God, it's Matthew Bell.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the people going, come out, Matthew. We're outside here. Let us in, Matthew. And it's like, oh my God, it's Matthew Bell. He's a massive nonce. That was. So I've said less about that than I've said all about it, haven't I?
No, but you're right. That will speak. Okay, so I have a segue for that because a lot of people which will watch this would probably know. Somebody won't. You were one of the first that I recall of, which had quite a show which had a really good follow-up. I mean, the Fundamentally Flawed with Jim Garnett, which, by the way, I'm trying to reach out to the guy. So you gotta shout out to him and tell him.
Oh, yes, he's on Twitter. He doesn't tend to do other social media so much.
Yeah, I don't do Twitter. So tell him to get in touch with me because I really want to reach out with him. But anyway, that show was something. I remember that it had a really good follow-up. It was pretty, again, followed by the old I hate the word community. I can't find a better one. But the old group of people, engaged in the conversation. And so I honestly don't know, and I really want to ask you after all these years, you managed to score quite some, interesting and big names at the time. I mean, Cy 10, and of course, the stupidest man alive, Matthew Bell. I still remember that name. Fuck me sideways. So how did you too? I'm putting Jim in that thing too. Even how did you manage to do that? I mean, was it just by chance? You were just stupid and say, I'm gonna ask the guy and see if he answers. What?
Yeah, well, we just asked people, but also I think we had the benefit of being amongst the first to ask, because Fundamentally Flawed, I mean, it was started well over 10 years ago, was the first episode. And I don't think there was really anybody else doing anything similar at the time. And certainly not with the kind of the group of presenters, because when it started, it was me, Jim, Peter Coote in Australia, and Mark down in Devon. And I'm still friends with all those people. And it was a nice mixture of people, because Peter was very straight talking, Jim was very straight talking, Mark was actually, everybody was just really straight talking, and we would just ask people. So we'd see that maybe that there was what's it called? Oh, there's another podcast that's chap from Paul Baird did, and I can't remember what they were called, the podcast, but they would get people, and then I'd occasionally think, well, if those people got Steve Drain from Westboro Baptist Church, why shouldn't we? So we'd contact them, and I'd just send messages to people and say, do you want to do it? And often the kind of very preachy Christian types would want to do it because they saw it as an opportunity to speak to the heathens and maybe convert them.
Right.
So that was, yeah, it was a case of just ask, and a lot of people said yes. So it's how we managed to get people like Venom Fang X and PP Simmons guy on. We just, yeah, we asked people. They said yes. They came on. They didn't seem to actually quite know what to expect. In the case of something like Steve Drain, they hung up on us because they didn't like the fact that we were quoting scripture at them. We had a good one with Venom Fang X because Jim really knew his stuff about him, and just asked him straight out difficult questions. I think that's the other thing as well that we did. We didn't shy away from asking difficult questions. We weren't kind of worried that the guests would go, because if they did, we could fill the time anyway. Mm-hmm. So we weren't worried about offending the guests. So, you know, and so we had like that episode with Matthew Bell, which initially was just going to be Fundamentally Flawed to speak to Matthew Bell, who I think Jim had found. And Jim changed the name of the episode while it was airing, because that was when we were doing them live on Google Plus or on Google, whatever it was, Hangouts.
Yeah.
And they were streamed live. And that was... He changed the name of the episode while it was on to Fundamentally Flawed Talk to the Stupidest Man in the World. And I just remember that one because I think I'd literally just moved house. I think me and my ex-wife Kat had moved house that week or maybe even that day. So I was just dipping in and out of that episode because our broadband wasn't up, everything was still in boxes, all sorts of stuff was going on. And I just remember dipping in, and Jim, I don't know if Jim had anything to drink, but Jim kept on just...
I think he had a little bit. I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I'd dip in and I'd just hear Jim going, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. And I was like, oh, this is going well. Clearly this guy's a genius that we're speaking to. And I'd hear this other Scottish guy going, what you don't do is, what you do is, and it's like, I'm going about kalam, cosmological argument, and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of thought, what's going on? There's this chaos happening, and I'm kind of dipping in and out, going on my phone, you know. It was an interesting one. But yeah, most of the time with getting the bigger guests in air quotes, it was a case of just asking people and being luckily in the position where there hadn't been too many of us doing the same kind of thing beforehand.
Right.
So it seemed that we were okay at that time to ask people and for them to say yes. There wasn't that, no fatigue had kind of kicked into the kind of debate scene by that point. I mean, it started to go a little bit like that later on when everybody was doing it. I think it was then, you know, then you could tune into... I remember sitting in the house in Bilston I was in one hangout and I had another hangout on another computer, and I had another computer with another hangout, and I had headphones from both those hangouts going into my individual ears, and was listening and contributing to a third hangout. And I think there was... You could switch between various YouTube channels.
Right.
You'd be having almost the same show on all of them. You know, you see this grid of faces, or it would be the line of faces along the bottom of the screen, wouldn't it? With the, you know, there'd be Nadia in the corner going, yeah, and there'd be JD Kane there, and then there'd be somebody like Thick Shades dropping in and shouting abuse, and it all got very samey. So that but it kind of took over a lot of people's lives, I think. But certainly going back to Fundamentally Flawed, that I kind of sometimes look back on Fundamentally Flawed and prefer the earlier years of it when we would record on Skype, and then it wouldn't be live and it would get uploaded to like iTunes and stuff.
Right.
And it would be audio only. We could edit it if we wanted to, though we rarely did. We just took out any of the little bits that were real catastrophe. Sometimes we'd make like 3 episodes in an evening and just dump them all on the next day. And that was more fun, I think. I seem to remember. I remember those episodes more fondly than the later Hangout episodes. So But I think, everybody was doing video hangouts, and I think we were late to that side of things, but we were early doing the podcast itself.
So that kind of experience, I mean, it took for quite some years, and in internet years it lasts like centuries, and I'm sure it left something even when you just got fed up, and went back to your life. And I know you're writing books, by the way, but we talked about that later. What was left from those experiences? I mean, from a human point of view, I mean, was it the arguments? Was it the people that you met? I mean, how do you recall in a visceral way, if you get what I mean?
The people who could have stuck with me from it, the arguments were just all the same over and over again. So none of my main recollection is that none of the fundamentalists' arguments were in any way convincing, and that there were some people I met who were some of the worst people I'd ever met in my entire life, and there were some people who were really good, and the people who were really good are people I'm still in contact with, and that I'd check that I was still on Facebook. I've seen we're still friends on Facebook, and we have been for years now, and because of various things that I'm kind of discovering about myself. Just knowing that people are okay and seeing them on Facebook is sometimes enough for me to see that people are still out there. So, because I don't use my Facebook as a just accept everybody kind of thing. I just have very specific people on, people either I know personally or people I know through music or through, things that are fairly close and who I feel comfortable sharing kind of things that are quite kind of intimate with. So there were people like that stuck with me, and that I've kind of maintained this feeling of kind of they're still friends, even if I haven't spoken to them for a long time, face to face. So there's that, but then there was the other people, the people who were just really awful. They never got any better in my head over the years, and the greater the distance has been since it, I kind of look back on some of them and I just think, wow, those people were just awful. How could they live with themselves being such awful people, being so aggressive, so judgmental of everybody, and doing things that were just really kind of morally suspect, and doing it because they kind of said, oh, I can be forgiven, G-Man making accusations that I was having an affair with Fiona at one point, and it's like, what? And Arcane Logos, or whatever his name was, claiming that my now ex-wife had been sending him naked photos and things, and it's like, these things aren't actually true. But these guys were supposed to be presenting themselves as the great kind of followers of Christ. Yeah. And they were the people who we were supposed to be kind of looking up to and going, oh yeah, no, I want to follow Jesus now. I mean, thick shades. Yeah. I mean, there's so many things wrong with that guy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what the baseline, for being a decent human being is, right? So.
Absolutely. I mean, when it came to the point where somebody who was as odious as Campbell could be compared to some of the others and would come across well.
Yes.
Come across,
right.
I mean, he was an awful human being.
Oh, yeah.
But he would come across, compared to some of them, he would come across as a man of principle.
Yeah.
And that just shows how low the digging into the bottom of the barrel was going. I mean, it was through the bottom of the barrel, and there was just more barrel to find. It was astounding, and I don't miss those people, but they've stuck in my head. The feeling, like you said, the visceral thing is this sort of visceral kind of like, oh, those people were awful. And the only one I've had any interaction with in the last 4 or 5 years, occasionally, is Andy Jack, who still convinced that I destroyed his CamCap business, which is nonsense. The last time I had any interaction with him was maybe about a year ago. I made a video directed to him, and I don't really make videos very often on YouTube anymore. And I made a video directed to him because he'd been going on about how great Brexit was when it happened.
Right.
And I came back to him and said, it's been 5 years now. It's an unmitigated disaster. Have you got anything to say about it? And he made a video back saying that, we've got to give it time and stuff. It's like, mate, we've given it 5 years. It's not worked. It's clearly getting worse and worse. But no, because at the time apparently I was a salty SJW who was just a lefty Marxist maggot.
Right. So a couple of quick questions that I actually have one which. Yeah, I don't think we'll have time, but I'll tell you later, and you decide if it was interesting or not. You were mostly in the same situation as I was and some other people was, living in Europe and having to deal mostly with American, Christians and stuff like that. And I remember that at the beginning I was quite flabbergasted by, the situation that they had, and honestly, for the sake of me, could not understand why people were so passionate. Because we have Christians where we live, but we don't have that situation. So was it the same impact for you? How long did it take you for you to understand? What the fuck are those guys talking about? They're Christians. They're okay. My mom is a Christian. It's just not bothering me.
Exactly. It was. I think part of it was. It was the realization that people like Eric Hovind and Matt Slick weren't outliers, that they were pretty standard evangelical Christians, and that in many cases they were quite mild compared to some of their little fanboys. Because the sheer lunacy of G-Man's endless streams. It was just these, you'd drop in and you'd have these 8-hour-long hangouts that would just, you could dip in and out of them, and it would just be this stream of madness. And it does seem very alien to the form of Christianity we have in Europe, because I'm sure your experience of it is the same, is that it's very much a kind of, it's just a thing that just sort of hovers in the background, and nobody's that passionate about it.
Yeah.
And the people who are super passionate about it, everybody looks at them a bit like, he's a little bit. You look at them a little bit askance, don't you? And go, he's a bit weird.
You're talking to someone which has the bloody Vatican around.
Yes.
So right. Can't get better at that. So
exactly. This is the thing. You look at the Pope, and the Pope seems fairly moderate,
right,
compared to some of these lunatics.
Oh yeah.
Who we would speak to, and again, you'd have something like G-Man claiming that Catholics weren't proper Christians, and it was just really weird. These battle lines that they tried to draw, and I think one of my failings at the time was that I got sucked into those battles, and it seemed to be quite important at the time. So it becomes something that it would consume a lot of my time and a lot of my mental headspace, and. There's, like I said, like I insinuated earlier, there's a reason for that I'm kind of discovering at the moment, which I'll come to in a mo. But it was just very, very strange. But what I'll do is I'll tell you about this thing. So recently, I'd been having a conversation with my partner, and she was saying, "Oh, you're very rude to people," and I was thinking, well, I don't think I am very rude to people. But I thought, what is this? Why is there this disconnect between my experience and the way other people perceive me? So I decided to go and do the AQ50 autism test, the autism quotient 50 test. Mm-hmm. And I did that and came out with significant indicators of autism. So, which would no doubt have somebody like glutes going.
Oh yeah. Right.
So this is, you're hearing it here first, folks. The likelihood is that I have autism, and I'm going through the whole kind of process of going through medical side of things and getting to the point where to see if we get a diagnosis of it. But I think that would partly explain the kind of weird obsession that it had for me, the way it kind of like consumed everything, because I've looked back over various periods of my life, and I've had periods where I was obsessed with just one thing, and it became all consuming. Like when I was a child, I was really interested in ships and boats, and would just read about ships and boats. Then it was birds, then it was butterflies, then it was Doctor Who, then it was Star Wars, then it was Tolkien, and I would be encyclopedic about these things to the exclusion of everything else. And I'd only want to talk about those things. And, whereas I looked back, at the time I just thought, I'm just interested. But now I can look back and go, right, okay, is there a wiring issue for that? And I think possibly the nature of the great debate scene and the great debate community allowed something like that to be fed.
Right.
So that itch could be scratched all the time, all day long, day or night.
Right.
I could get up. There'd be something going on.
It became self-feeding.
Absolutely. Like I'd get up in the morning, I'd be getting ready for work, I'd go to do a poo, I'd sit on the toilet with my phone, I'd open a Hangout, and you could guarantee somebody like G-Man would be ranting away. Or I'd wake up to a load of notifications going, so-and-so's just said this about you in this Hangout, and it's on now, you should drop in and say something. And also with the difference in times, and I'm sure you had this very similar experience.
Oh yeah,
being up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And suddenly you could find yourself going, it's 3 a.m. Why am I still up?
Because somebody's wrong on the internet.
Yes, absolutely. Somebody has said something that seems really important, and it's essential that we question what G-Man said. I must hop in immediately to discuss this. It's very important whether somebody's used his name or not. These things, in retrospect, just did not matter.
Yeah. And
I think it was when I got some space away from it that hit me, that it didn't matter. Yeah. And also, like I said near the start, I kind of stopped caring because I realised that the Christians around me in my kind of real life weren't kind of mental cases. And I realised in the office I work in, there's a lot of Muslim staff who weren't, contrary to the cartoons of Sight and Atheist, weren't trying to kill everybody. Right. And were completely just moderate people who just happened to believe in a slightly different version of the same God that the Christians believed in. Right. So I kind of hit this point where I thought, instead of trying to just hit everybody around the head with my arguments against religion, I'm just, as long as people aren't hurting me and aren't hurting other people, then I don't care.
Right.
And I felt like I'd done enough already.
So, last question before going to the last part of this, conversation. I would say trademark is not the right word, but you've always been known, for dealing with religious aspects of the conversation, stuff like that. I had the slight feeling, that thing, on the back of your neck, stuff like that you're not shy about social and political discussion. It's just that it wasn't really the case that you showed up. I mean, every so often I could see, like a glimpse of that, but we're really specific. So right now, I will give you 2 minutes to talk to me about Brexit. Go.
Okay, Brexit. Never in the history of the world has a country committed such an act of self-harm against itself. It was an argument built on lies by right-wingers with agendas. It's interesting now because we're seeing the whole edifice collapse in the UK at the moment, because of the government we have is very much kind of the vote leave government with Boris Johnson at the top, and that's all falling apart now because the larger amount of the public are starting to see him for the person that a lot of the Remain side were saying he is. So I mean, I've spent years telling people that Boris Johnson's a liar and that you can't trust him. And it's now, and that Brexit was a terrible idea, and people are now starting to see it because the things that he did during the pandemic that are now starting to come out. These parties in Number 10. I mean, he's not quite at Berlusconi levels yet, but he's on the way.
Yeah.
But there's that house of cards is coming down, And I think people are starting to realise that people are seeing that their lives aren't better, and people are seeing that they haven't got more money in their pockets, and they're seeing that it's now harder for them to go on holiday, and it costs them more when they go on holiday, and forget about importing and exporting things from the UK. You know, I used to buy a lot of records from Denmark. Forget that now.
Yeah.
Absolutely no hope. It's just so incredibly ridiculously expensive. So difficult to do. But even getting stuff from the States is a nightmare now. So Britain is really kind of isolated itself, and I think people are starting to realise. So though I'd like to be in a position where I could say, "Ha ha, told you so," I can't really, because I'm kind of suffering it as well.
Right.
And I love us suffering it as well, and we're all in this same sinking boat. And no matter how many times we point and say, well, it's not my fault, it doesn't stop the boat from sinking. So, yeah.
You're still a passenger, right?
Yeah, I've still got to ride the boat, yeah.
Okay, so we are at the end of it. This is the last part, the last 10 minutes. Because, again, I want to keep this short because I want people to either be super interested and look for more, look for you on the internet and stuff like that. Or if we've been super boring, people will say, oh, fuck me enough, thank God it's over. So, this is the last part where I ask you 3 questions that I ask you to send me in order for me to ask you. It's way more easy to do than to explain. But, okay. So, those are the 3 questions in the order that you sent me. Fuck. What's your most impressive special ability?
So the way I got these questions was because I had no idea what to ask. So I asked people on Twitter and Facebook what they'd suggest.
Okay.
So this question came from Nadia, who I've known since university. So I've known Nadia now, God, it must be coming up. It's going to be coming up 30 years fairly soon. So what's my most impressive special ability?
Yeah.
I'm quite good at remembering things, though my partner would argue that I don't remember them correctly. Remembering where things are and keeping on top of stuff. Like a couple of weeks ago, the drummer in one of the bands I'm in wanted a copy of a song that she'd sent to a radio station. And she goes, oh, I think I sent that to you. Have you got it? And I was able to go, yeah, I know exactly where it was. And it wasn't in any, I don't file things in a kind of super kind of organised way, but I just remember where things are. So I think that it's not really an impressive ability, but I'm quite organised.
It's quite special, yeah.
I know where things are.
Okay.
I can remember where things are, yeah.
That's good enough. Good enough. Yeah, I mean, I've been married 30 years, and I know exactly what you were talking about before. But anyway, so the second question is, what's your second favorite album?
Right, okay. My second favorite album. My first favorite album is called The Texas Jerusalem Crossroads by a band called Lift to Experience, who are from Texas. A tremendous record. It's a concept album about the end of the world and the apocalypse, and their singer was brought up with a kind of fire and brimstone preaching father. So it's this proper kind of whole thing. It starts with angels coming to the band in Texas and saying, this is the end of the world's going to happen. Yeah, it has this amazing line of the band. It has this conversation between the band and the angels, and the band say, well, that doesn't sound very Sunday go-to meeting to us. And the angel replies with, don't you boys know nothing? USA is the center of Jerusalem. And it's kind of I think that's quite close. So that's my favorite record.
Okay.
My second favorite record tends to change. At the moment, I'm really, so I think my second favorite record can be, I think it's a slot that can sit for things that I'm really loving at the time. So maybe my third is always the same, and my first favorite record is always the same. So my first would be the Lift to Experience. My third would probably be Hunting High and Low by Aha, and so number 2 can change. At the moment, I think it would be Versus Universe by a band called Rev Magnetic, who are from Glasgow. Have a singer called Luke Sutherland, who is one of people. Everybody should go and listen to Rev Magnetic, and anything that Luke's done in the past. He's been a member of Mogwai in the past. He was in a band called Longfin Killy back in the 90s. He's an unbelievable lyricist. He's written novels over the years as well, and his songs have a kind of almost like a screenplay-esque side to them. The new album, I say new, and it came out a couple of years ago, but Versus Universe is an album about the daughter of astronauts who are from somewhere in Africa, and he was inspired by it because he read an article about how some African country had its own space program.
Oh yeah, the I think it was the Congo. I think.
Yes, that was
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
So she's got these characters. He's got this character who's the daughter of these two astronauts from the Congo, and that they've gone off into space and then have been lost in space. And the whole album is about her feelings of being rejected by them, and saying if I'd been a boy, would you have ignored me? And eventually decides she's going to leave the Congo and sells the house that they lived in and says she's going to go somewhere else, and travels to America, where she becomes kind of like, she goes to university in America and becomes very kind of hedonistic, gets lost in sex and drugs, and then eventually meets somebody who kind of pulls her back down to earth. And it's this whole story about this idea of, she's kind of drifting off because she's drifting off into her own space, and she needed somebody to ground her. It doesn't sound that great from what I've said there, but it's spectacularly good.
It sounds interesting. So, okay, the third question is, what is your next book going to be about? Which actually begs the question, what was your previous book about?
I've written a few books. So I did must be about 15 years ago. I did a book about being in bands. About my experience of being in bands from a teenager through to my 30s. Then, about 6 years ago, I decided to write my autobiography, write a memoir. And partly was an exercise in seeing how much I could remember. Partly was, and there's no denying it, it was kicked off by going to the Cheltenham Literary Festival, and me and my partner Nick went to see the Norwegian writer Karl Ove Knausgård being interviewed, and he's written this ridiculously long book called My Struggle, which is in 6 volumes, and it's 3,000 pages about his life. And he's it's not written from the point of view of somebody who's a great achiever. He'd only written 1 novel or 2 novels when he released the first volume of My Struggle, and he just writes in extreme detail about his life. And I came out of seeing him being interviewed and thought, that's actually something that's worth trying. I'm going to do that, just do some writing. So, unlike his, mine's chronological. So it just starts with my first thing I can remember and just goes through like that. And when I was writing it, I had no idea what it was really going to be about, apart from just about my life. It turned out, as I wrote it, certain themes started to emerge. And it ended up being about the various women that have had impacts on me across the years. The longest version of it was just shy of 300,000 words. So it was like a 900-page book. The shortest version is about 180,000. So I've got a shorter. It's still not finished because I've not completely.
Yeah, because you're not dead already. Yeah, yeah.
But I mean,
right. That makes sense.
Yeah, so I mean, that was called 500,000 Lies, with the subtitle My Wrongdoings 1972 to 2017. And one thing I did try with it was to be brutally honest and to write about things that I hadn't told anybody. So all the worst things I've ever done are in that. Mm-hmm. And the worst secrets I had. I kind of thought, there's no point in me doing this if I'm not going to be really kind of brutal about it. So I write about things in there that I wouldn't dream of telling anybody, but I thought I have to write all this down. Right. And it's been weird because some people have read early drafts of it, and it's a bit weird them knowing these things. So I wrote that. Then I've been writing a book about St. Paul, which kind of feeds back a little bit to the whole stuff with Fundamentally Flawed. I've been writing this book called Cast an Iron Bell, which the title came to me first before the topic did. And I kind of thought, well, why would you cast a bell out of iron? And I thought, well, maybe it's the Romans would do it for a church bell. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe it would be that because I'd always had this idea that Paul the Apostle was maybe in the pay of Rome and wasn't, he was taking the radical religion of Christianity, of early Christianity, and making it acceptable to the Romans, and that was his driving purpose. So I've written this book that's about his life, but written from the point of view of him being a Roman citizen first and foremost. It's written as almost like presented like an essay. So it quotes other books and it quotes the Bible and all this kind of stuff. But half the sources I quote I've made up, and Bible verses I've changed to make it fit the narrative that I'm telling. So it basically finishes with him retiring to Rome.
Right.
And it has a part where he, for the whole years of his preaching, he's been in contact with Rome and being told what to do by Caesar. And eventually he kind of goes a little bit mad and starts to believe it's all true, and then eventually comes back to himself, and there's a whole section told from the point of view of Barnabas, and then there's a section there's a big bit where I quote another person's book about Barnabas written from the point of view of Barnabas, and that's then followed with an interview with the person who wrote that book, even though they're both just me, and it's all layers and layers and layers. So there's that. I did do some ghostwriting as well. And
Are those books published or self-published? Can
Not
people
yet.
find them? Okay.
They're not yet. Another band book is hanging around, can be got. And I did write a little book about somebody I worked with, which is called Everybody Dies. That can be found on Amazon. So if you look for Alex Botten,
Okay.
you'll find a couple of the books on Amazon. But yeah, I'll reveal another big secret for you. Dave Chapman, who was a kind of slightly kind of side figure, he was a little kind of a satellite figure on the scene, had this whole thing about this thing called the Pathway Conspiracy, and he released a book a couple of years ago called The Darkest Path, and I wrote that for him.
Okay.
So, yeah, he sent me all his notes, he sent me all the stuff he'd written, and I just rewrote the whole thing for him. So I ghost wrote it for him. So I was there's the reveal. I was Dave Chapman's ghostwriter. An interesting job to do.
Yeah.
Being given a big pile of I mean, he'd written the whole thing,
Right.
but it just, his writing wasn't brilliant. So I mean, I'm not saying mine is, but
Yeah.
I went back and rewrote it for him, and turned it into something that had a story. I managed to get a car chase in there. I have this whole thing. If I'm doing something short, there has to be a car chase.
Oh yeah.
So
Fuck it.
I put a car chase in. Luckily, he'd had something like that happen, but I really pumped it up.
Right.
But yeah, so I did that. So the next one, which is the question, isn't it? I guess the next one really is that Paul one. Though I have got an idea of a book. Remember those old choose your own adventure games
Yeah.
where you'd have the book?
Yeah.
I've been thinking, and it's been something that's been in my head for a couple of years. It's just trying to work out how I would do it. But writing something that's like a literary version of something like that. So I've got this idea of it being 4 friends coming back together for the wedding of one of their other former school friends, and it being set across one evening. And at certain points, giving you a choice of who you follow.
Right.
In the book. So you'll get to a certain point, somebody will go out the room to go to the toilet or to go outside for a smoke.
Yeah.
And if you follow them, you'll follow a bit of a narrative that goes off with them.
You go to page X and you follow.
Follow them. You read their bit, and then you rejoin the main narrative.
Right.
But you might have missed something that's happened.
Oh yeah, of course. Right.
And then that character will then be unaware of why there's tension with other people. So I think it's got legs, but I think it's just going to be really complicated to work out how to do it.
I remember there was a series of comics around here in Italy. Actually, it was Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and all that stuff, and they often publish stories like that. And they were really, really, really cool. Because you got to the end to say, okay, fuck me, let's see what happens if I do the other way, and you get to follow all of them. Yeah, it was really
and I think the idea of it being, instead of it being kind of like a game, I like the idea of it being something that people would see it as kind of a serious novel. It would be a novel that would just happen to have that as
Right.
part of its structure.
Right.
So I think there's something there, but it's complicated.
Yeah.
Then I've got other ideas. I've got ideas for 3 or 4 different books, but whether I'll ever get around to doing them is another matter, because I tend to kind of run hot and cold with things, and then I get obsessed with something else and I put it to one side. So yeah. So anyway, there you go.
So we have to wrap it up. Alex, thank you very much. Just type me, further if there is some links you want to put in the description and all that stuff. And I really hope you won't be a stranger. I mean, you will show up, somewhere, sometime.
Absolutely, it's always a pleasure to speak to you, Fabio.
If you want to get in touch with some people, just email me. There are some enclaves of the internet, where really dubious people, still gather around, for the impromptu joke and stuff like that. So that might be interesting. I managed to lure Matthew Steele recently.
Wow. Yeah, I think you had Christopher Mouty on with him as well, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, Christopher Mouty. Yeah. And eventually I'll probably be able to lure in the same enclave Negation of P, which I made an interview with him too.
Very good. Yeah. The only person who we won't be pulling in is DPR Jones, sadly. Passed away during the space. That's the sad thing, isn't it? That certain people have, since the whole thing evaporated, certain people are no longer with us. I think what's his name? Inventor Gorilla. He died as well, didn't he? So that's the circle of life.
It happens, man. Okay. Again, thank you very much. It's been a huge pleasure, and thank you very much. Okay.
You're very welcome.
Talk to you soon. Cheers, man. Bye bye.
Okay. Cheers.
If I didn't care more than words can say, if I didn't care, would I